Hello, my name is Katie Crenshaw, and I'm the University Compliance Coordinator here at UAB. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I will be discussing research codes of conduct. At the conclusion of this presentation, you should be better able to explain the purpose of research codes of conduct, recognize common elements of codes of conduct, discuss in a little more depth conflicts of interest in research, and identify ways that research coordinators can help support code of conduct expectations. Before we begin, I'd like for you to consider this exercise. Take just a moment and think about what it means to you to be ethical. What are the characteristics of an ethical person? When I think about an ethical person, these are some of the characteristics that come to mind. That person is honest, respectful, knowledgeable, responsible or accountable, fair, dutiful, thoughtful, and deliberate. Now, you probably come up with a bunch more characteristics for an ethical person, and that's really the purpose of this exercise. It's to demonstrate that we're all ethical very differently. We might embrace common elements or common values and principles, but we interpret them and apply them uniquely based on our individual personal and professional experiences. A code of conduct isn't something that's meant to teach bad people how to be good. Instead, it serves to define for members of a specific community what it means in that particular environment to be ethical. So what is a code of conduct? Again, it's a framework or a tool that individuals in a specific community can use to guide their ethical decision making. It's a reflection of an organization's core values. In fact, codes of conduct are often written along with an organization's vision, mission, and value statements. They're frequently a foundational element of an organization's compliance program, which is one way that an organization may mitigate its risk under the U.S. federal sentencing guidelines if wrongdoing was to occur. A code of conduct is a set of expectations for all community members, no matter what role or position they occupy within that organization. And really, it's just a way of illustrating that just as important as the goals we achieve as an organization is the way that we achieve those goals. A way to communicate to community members that the ends don't always justify the means. So how do codes of conduct work? Generally speaking, codes of conduct are written very broadly. They're much more overarching than applicable laws, regulations, policies, and procedures. Some codes of conduct are limited to the more legal aspects of compliance, but most are a little bit broader and, again, define what it means to be ethical, not just legal. They're supported through additional policies and procedures and other workplace rules that describe more specifically what steps are to be taken under certain circumstances. So it isn't in and of itself a singular policy. It really is supported by other more detailed policies. And they, of course, don't cover every situation. And so codes of conduct can often require considerable interpretation. But that said, they're a good place to start a discussion about what actions may be called for, again, under certain circumstances. Where do applicable codes of conduct come from? In the research context, codes of conduct come from a number of different places and may, in fact, overlap. Federal agencies and sponsors, depending on your funding source, may apply to your role as a research coordinator. Journals and publishers often have codes of conduct that apply to those who wish to publish in their document or in their publications. Specific disciplines and professional associations also have codes of conduct. For example, as a compliance professional, I adhere to the code of conduct for those working in compliance. Universities, medical centers, and other research institutes also have very organizational specific codes of conduct. UAB, as an enterprise, has a code of conduct that applies to its employees. I want to pause here and make sure that everyone recognizes it's important to check with their specific employer to determine whether their organization has a research code of conduct that applies to their work. Again, many of these may overlap. On this slide is a sampling of some common elements of codes of conduct. We'll go through each of these briefly and spend a little bit more time on objectivity, as I said, as it relates to conflict of interest. Again, these elements are often found in codes of conduct, but they may vary based on an organization's mission or vision or business line. There are common themes of these elements throughout research codes of conduct, however. The first and foremost is one related to quality, excellence, and integrity. Organizations that have this element in their code require their members to commit to excellence no matter what business they participate in, whether that's research, patient care, or other business interactions. Honesty and accountability are core features of the quality element. Members ask questions when information is needed rather than plowing ahead without full information about the appropriate next step. They pay careful attention to detail. And particularly with research, they champion openness and freedom of inquiry. They maintain professional competence. And they model ethical standards and conduct through instruction and example. This is particularly true for institutions of higher education where education and training are a core mission objective. Elements of quality with respect to research also often address an organization's position against research misconduct, which is the falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism of work. The next theme that often flows through research codes of conduct is respect. For many organizations, this is their version of the golden rule, treating others as you wish to be treated. And team members should be fair and civil, value diversity, both of people and ideas, foster professional relationships, promote conflict resolution over an adversarial approach to problem solving, and prohibit discrimination and retaliation for raising constructive concerns. We're going to talk about retaliation a little bit more in a later slide. Another common element is compliance. As I said, most codes of conduct go beyond just what behaviors are required in an organization to be legal and go beyond and describe more ethical behaviors. However, compliance is generally a core feature or a core element of many codes of conduct. And what do we mean by that? Members are required to learn and follow the rules applicable to their work. They are intended to be proactive to prevent and detect compliance problems, to be proactive to prevent and detect compliance problems, to see compliance as an ongoing day-to-day responsibility. UAB offers its employees resources to help recognize what is required. For example, specialized training is available for IRB studies and effort reporting, just as an example. A policies and procedures library catalogs university documents. And a compliance directory points employees to subject matter experts on campus for answers to detailed questions. Your organization may offer resources to help you determine what your compliance requirements are as well. It's also important in this element to remember that compliance issues should be brought forward to an appropriate office within the organization so that it can be addressed and resolved. And as organizations develop plans to resolve issues, that anyone with a position of responsibility to carry out corrective actions does so. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about follow-up on compliance issues in a later slide. Another common element relates to privacy and security. In terms of research, privacy and security are governed by HIPAA and IRB requirements, and other presenters within this series will focus more on these requirements in much greater detail, so I won't spend a lot of time here. Essentially, what we're trying to accomplish with a privacy element to a code of conduct is respect the privacy of information. That may be patient records, that may be student records, that may be employee records. Follow document retention and disposal policies. Generally, organizations have schedules that set forth periods for retention and acceptable means of destruction after those periods are through or after they're concluded. This also means maintaining information security using appropriate electronic and physical safeguards. So much of our data is collected and maintained electronically now that IDs and passwords are our most critical security measures, which is why they should be strong and never shared. Members are also expected to exercise appropriate data management practices. That is, determine where and how data is stored and who has access to that data. This addresses privacy and security first and foremost, but it also ensures that data is available should questions come up later. This is particularly true with questions of research misconduct. Another element of codes of conduct is objectivity. It implies really in all contexts, but it's critical for research. So we'll spend a little bit more time here. What we mean is to ensure one's personal interests do not interfere with their professional judgment, that our personal roles don't interfere with our professional roles. It means accepting benefits, awards, prizes, payments, and other gifts only in accordance with organizational standards. Because gifts from people or companies that are related to our research can create either real or perceived personal conflicts, we should accept them only in accordance with the laws, regulations, and policies that govern them. This also means fulfilling obligations for transparency and disclosing relationships with third parties, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Striving to avoid bias, and ultimately, after an independent body has had an opportunity to review relationships and make recommendations for actions to prevent conflicts of interest, adhering to any management plan established to manage conflicts of interest. So why should we be concerned with conflicts of interest in research? As researchers, we are accountable to our participants, our colleagues, our funding agencies and sponsors, our peers, and ultimately the public, as we are trying to create generalizable knowledge and that will improve the human condition. Trust between and among these stakeholders is critical for successful research, and a lack of objectivity can threaten that trust. What follows here on this slide is a quote that stuck with me after many years of considering conflicts of interest in research, and it goes like this. If you can't trust the medical profession or the people creating these things to benefit humanity, if they're going to sell out for profits, who is left to trust? This was from a study patient in a trial that was impacted by conflicts of interest. What is a conflict of interest then? What do we mean here? Conflicts can take a number of different, or may have a number of different characteristics. In research, and what we're going to be talking about here, is really financial conflicts of interest, where one member of the research team or the institution has a financial interest that's related to the research and has the potential to significantly and directly affect the design, conduct, or reporting of research. As I mentioned earlier, conflicts of interest can be real or perceived. In many ways, when we're managing conflicts of interest, we're managing people's perceptions because really perception is reality as it relates to conflict of interest. Information on individuals, institutions, financial interests is often collected and conflicts are managed by multiple sources. That includes your institution or the institution where the research is being conducted, the sponsor, the IRB that's reviewing and approving the protocol, the FDA, and journals and publishers. All or many of these may have conflicts of interest policies that apply to a single research team. So it's very important to understand what their policies are, how they apply to you, what the requirements are, and how you meet those. To demonstrate what we mean here, here's a case-based scenario. Let's go through it together. Dr. Researcher, who is the chair of the Department of Medicine, plans to conduct an IRB-approved clinical trial at the university. The study is funded by a small pharmaceutical company, which is partially owned by the university. Dr. Researcher has a consulting agreement with the company and earns approximately $2,000 a month for his services. The company's founder is Dr. Researcher's longtime colleague and friend, and he plans to analyze the data collected at the university. The founder's wife has been hired as the study nurse coordinator. As you will see, there are a number of different financial interests and relationships at play here. First of all, the institution has a financial interest in the sponsor. Additionally, the IRB that is approving the protocol is situated at the university, which has the financial interest. And although it is designed to be an independent body, may be seen or perceived to follow the lead of others with influence at the university. The PI has a financial relationship with the sponsor as well, and may be perceived to lean toward favorable results for the study to continue that relationship going. The company's founder and his wife, of course, have a financial interest in the sponsor as well. If favorable results increase the value of the company, they may have a financial interest at stake there, or a potential increase there. So you can see there are a number of financial interests at play here as well. There are also personal relationships, but again, in terms of conflict of interest in research for this discussion, we're focusing on the financial ones. How might these potential conflicts be managed? On this slide are a list of mechanisms that many organizations might use to help avoid the appearance of bias. For instance, changing the roles in the study. With his relationship with the company as a consultant, perhaps Dr. Researcher might be a co-investigator and have a colleague join him as PI. An external IRB from a collegial institution, an external group, along with a data safety monitoring board, may help oversee risks to patients. Disclosure would allow sunlight on these relationships so that anyone reviewing the data or reviewing any potential publications from this study would have that information and be able to make their own personal judgment about the reliability of the data. Safe harbors are often appointed for individuals working on the study team to report any potential problems or perceived influence over the results of the study. And of course, a combination of mechanisms generally is employed to address the risks from a broader perspective. So any number of these could be part of a management plan. Conflict of interest management plans are used to, again, reduce the risk of conflict of interest or reduce the risk of bias in a study's results. Management plans must be implemented by the study team and monitored by the organization responsible for issuing it. Again, with overlapping conflict of interest policies and groups managing conflicts of interest with research, that may be multiple plans managed by multiple parties. I've included some conflict of interest resources that I find useful on this slide, both with NIH. Excuse me. Back to the common elements of codes of conduct. Another common element is stewardship, which is essentially being responsible and accountable with the resources of the organization and those funding our research. Excuse me. In this element, members are expected to prevent waste and abuse, report their effort accurately so that the costs of business are attached to the appropriate awards or accounts, promote efficient operations, follow appropriate protocols for obligating the organization and expenditures. Following sound financial practices. This means responsible fiscal management, especially, again, for funds that are awarded to an institution for specific purposes. And, of course, engage in appropriate oversight and monitoring of the funds being spent. Another common element is safety. Safety is especially important in the research context, where researchers are responsible not only for the safety of themselves and their coworkers, but also for human subjects or patients. In this element, we think about promoting personal safety and following safe workplace practices, protecting research participants, as I said, maintaining physical security of property, reporting potential unsafe or hazardous conditions and actions, and finally, protecting the environment, both our personal environment and the more general global environment. This element relates to stewardship, but for academic medical centers and research institutes in particular, this is a significant business area and risk, and it's often addressed separately, and that is appropriate documentation, coding, billing, and collecting. Here, team members provide medically appropriate goods and services and render services within the scope of their licensure, guidelines, and bylaws. They substantiate goods and services provided with complete and accurate documentation, and importantly, accurately code and bill for services based on current payer and government standards. Excuse me. And because other presenters will focus more on that, we won't spend a lot of time discussing that particular element. So what is the research coordinator's role in supporting codes of conduct? First and foremost, research coordinators can work to understand what codes of conduct apply to them and fulfill those expectations. In a more general sense, they can also promote a working environment that encourages trust, transparency, and open dialogue, where problems can be raised constructively and addressed as a team. It's important to bring good faith concerns to the attention of the appropriate office. Generally, we recommend here at UAB taking issues to first your immediate supervisor or the lead on a project. Excuse me. That way, the information can get to the appropriate office up through the chain of command or up through appropriate leadership. Sometimes, though, based on the issue, that's not always possible or comfortable. In that case, there are other offices within an organization that can help address an issue. HR is often used as a resource for employees, and many organizations like UAB operate a compliance office where individuals can take issues and receive assistance in getting answers to questions. Many organizations, again, as part of their compliance program, operate a hotline service that allows employees to bring forth concerns if they want to remain anonymous. Here at UAB, we operate an ethics hotline that's managed by a third-party service. Some organizations have third-party services, some are in-house. But generally speaking, anonymity is available in case that's the employee feels that is particularly necessary in their circumstances. However, all organizations are required to prohibit retaliation for raising concerns of that nature. Excuse me. Here are the takeaways from this brief presentation on research codes of conduct. First and foremost, an organizational code of conduct communicates to community members what it means to be ethical in that particular culture. Focusing on objectivity, conflicts of interest in research must be appropriately acknowledged and managed in order to preserve trust. Again, each member of a community has a responsibility to raise compliance concerns. That offers the organization the opportunity to improve and address issues. And finally, check with your institution's compliance office for more specific information on organizational codes of conduct that may apply to you. Here's my contact information in case anyone has questions or additional follow-up. Thank you for your attention.